I'm Lisa. Welcome back to Biblical Reality Check. Today, we're decoding one of the most haunting and misunderstood moments in early Christian literature, a moment preserved in the Gospel of Thomas, echoed in the Gospel of John, and repeated in every era of human history, including our own. It's the moment when truth becomes dangerous. The Gospel of Thomas, number 13, Jesus pulls Thomas aside and tells him something privately. When the other disciples ask Thomas what Jesus said, Thomas refuses to answer. But Jesus responds, saying, "If I tell you what I told him, you will pick up stones and throw them at me." Jesus isn't talking about literal stoning. He's talking about identity. Jesus is saying, the truth I just revealed would destroy the self you think you are, because the ego, the inherited identity, cannot survive certain truths. Centuries of theology have separated Thomas from the authorized Gospels, but the architecture is identical. In John chapter 8, verse 58, Jesus says, "Before Abraham was, I am." And the very next verse tells us, they, the Pharisees, picked up stones to throw at him. Why? Because Jesus wasn't making a chronological claim. He wasn't saying he existed before Abraham in time. He was revealing the timeless identity of the I am. The inner source he taught was within every human being. And that truth threatened the entire identity structure of the Pharisees. They didn't pick up stones because Jesus threatened God. They picked up stones because Jesus threatened their identity, the identity they built on lineage, hierarchy, and inherited authority. When Jesus tells the disciples in Thomas 13 that they would kill him if they heard what he told Thomas, he's pointing to the same psychological truth. The ego will always attack the truth that threatens its survival, because truth that dissolves false identity is always met with violence. In Thomas, the disciples would kill him for revealing the truth of identity. In John, the Pharisees tried to stone him for revealing the truth of identity. Two traditions, one architecture. This is not ancient history. This is the world we live in. Every era has people whose truth threatens the illusion, and in ours, those people are the whistleblowers, people who speak truth to power, people who expose corruption, deception, or systemic harm, people who reveal what institutions are built on and what those institutions desperately need to hide. And what happens? Their careers are destroyed, their reputations are smeared, their finances collapse, their mental health is targeted, their families are threatened, their lives are dismantled, not because they lied, but because they told the truth, and the systems built on illusion cannot survive truth. Just like the Pharisees, just like the disciples who would kill him if they heard what he told Thomas, the architecture is the same. If Thomas and John show us how individuals react to truth, the chief priest Caiaphas shows us how institutions react. In John chapter 11, verses 49 to 50, Caiaphas is told that Jesus is attracting huge crowds after word got out about him raising Lazarus from the dead. The religious leaders are panicking with the fear of the crowds awakening after hearing him speak. They know the illusion is cracking, and Caiaphas, the high priest, the embodiment of institutional ego, says, "It is better for you that one man dies for the people than that the whole nation perish." His statement is not theological, it's a survival strategy. Caiaphas is essentially saying, if the people internalize what Jesus is teaching, our entire hierarchy collapses, Because if identity is rooted in the inner I am, then no external religious authority has power. Jesus wasn't threatening the nation. He was threatening the illusion the priestly system depended on. So Caiaphas orders Jesus' arrest and execution, not because Jesus was dangerous, but because truth was dangerous to the system built on illusion. This is the same justification used against whistleblowers today. We need to protect the nation. We need to maintain stability. We need to prevent chaos. We need to protect national security. But the real motive is always the same. Truth threatens the illusion that power depends on. The truth that Jesus revealed in Thomas, in John, and in the temple is the same truth whistleblowers reveal today. Identity built on illusion must defend itself through destruction. When someone exposes the truth, the false identity collapses. The system built on that identity panics, and the system attacks the messenger, not because the messenger is wrong, but because the system cannot survive the truth. This is why Jesus says in Thomas, quote, "You will pick up stones and throw them at me," unquote, and why John says they picked up stones to throw at him, and why Caiaphas says it's better that one man die. The truth didn't change. The reaction didn't change. Only the century did. But here's the part we rarely say out loud. Ego will always destroy itself in its attempt to destroy the truth. That's the architecture behind Thomas 13. It's the architecture behind John 8. It's the architecture behind Caiaphas in John 11. And it's the architecture behind every corrupt, power-abusing system that attacks the people who expose it. Fragile egos, whether individual or institutional, always respond the same way. They attack, they smear, they silence, they punish, and they destroy, not because the truth is harmful, but because the ego cannot survive exposure. The ego, in every era, will burn down its own house to keep the illusion intact. It will destroy its own credibility, its own integrity, its own future, just to avoid facing the truth. The Pharisees weren't defending God. They were defending the identity they built around God. The disciples and Thomas weren't protecting Jesus. They were protecting the identity they built around being his followers. Caiaphas wasn't saving the nation. He was saving the hierarchy. And modern institutions aren't protecting the public. They're protecting the illusion they depend on. But here's the paradox. Truth doesn't fight back. Truth doesn't retaliate. Truth doesn't defend itself. Truth simply is. And in the end, the ego collapses under the weight of its own resistance. It destroys itself, trying to destroy what cannot be destroyed, because the I am, the truth of identity, is untouchable. It existed before Abraham. It existed before Caiaphas. It existed before every system built on illusion. And it will exist long after every ego has exhausted itself. This is the message hidden in all three stories. Ego cannot stand against truth. It can only exhaust itself resisting it. And when the ego collapses, the I am remains. That is the revelation Thomas heard. That is the revelation the Pharisees tried to stone. That is the revelation Caiaphas tried to silence. And that is the revelation every whistleblower embodies. Truth is eternal. Ego is temporary. And only one of them survives. You know, every time I work with these texts, I feel something I don't always say out loud. I feel the grief, not just for what was done to Jesus the man, the betrayal, the distortion, the violence, but for what has been done to his message ever since. Because the tragedy of the crucifixion didn't end on a hill outside Jerusalem. It continued in every century that followed. Every time his words were twisted into something he never meant, every time the truth he carried was buried under fear, hierarchy, and illusion. And sometimes I wonder, does the consciousness he spoke from feel the weight of all that? But then I remember the part of him that suffered was the human part, the part that could be betrayed, misunderstood, attacked, and killed. So when we grieve what was done to him, we're grieving from the human level, the level that can be wounded. But the consciousness he embodied, the truth he revealed, the I am he pointed to, that remains untouched, unburdened, unbroken. And maybe, just maybe, every time someone finally speaks that truth again, every time someone clears away the illusion, every time someone refuses to let the message be buried, maybe that's the moment his consciousness feels not the weight of what was done, but the relief of what is finally being restored. Because truth doesn't need to be defended, it only needs to be remembered. Thanks for watching.